He gets it out deep, and Havlicek steals it. Over the stands goes. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over.
One of the most iconic announcer calls of all time. Arguably the most iconic one ever. For anyone who follows the NBA, whether you're a new fan or an older fan, you've most likely heard of this. Havlicek stole the ball. This was against the Philadelphia 76ers in 1965, and that play launched them into the NBA Finals. But for most fans, that's usually the extent of how much they know about John Hondo Havlicek. Besides this incredible moment, very few fans know about the rest of his NBA career. Who was he? How good was he? And what do other former players and coaches think of him? In this video, we're gonna take a look at everything. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and let's get started. But before we start, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsor, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is an app that aggregates ticket prices from all over the web to help you find the best deals for games, concerts, Broadway shows, and other events. The prices marked in green are good, while the ones in red are bad. I've used the app to buy tickets before, and the process was very smooth. The app is very easy to use, and you can also see the view from your seats before you buy your tickets, which is my favorite feature. Use my promo code ANDY at checkout to get $20 off your first order. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's get started. In 1962, after Havlicek played 3 years at Ohio State, he was drafted with the 7th overall pick by the Boston Celtics. And he was also drafted by the Cleveland Browns of the NFL. Yeah, you heard that right. The Browns were so impressed with Havlicek's athletic ability that they brought him in for tryouts. Havlicek actually played a few exhibition games with them as a wide receiver. That's pretty cool. But of course, basketball was his main focus and he could not take up the Browns' offer to play for them. In his first couple years in the NBA, Havlicek would come off the bench. As a rookie, he averaged about 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists. Back then, in the 1960s, there was this stigma about coming off the bench. Everyone believed that bench players are clearly worse than starters, and they aren't as valuable. And at the time, it kinda made sense, considering most starters played like 45 minutes a game or something crazy like that, and the bench players were not seen as being that important. However, Havlicek was the first guy who really challenged that perception. When he was asked about his role coming off the bench, he said, "It never bothered me, because I think that role is very important to a club. One thing I learned from Red Auerbach was that it's not who starts the game, but who finishes it, and I generally was around at the finish." In his first 6 years in the NBA, he popularized the role of the sixth man, a guy who came off the bench, provided an instant spark, and he was just as part of the team as the starters were. Unfortunately, his game still needed some work, and that was partly why he could not crack the starting lineup. His teammate Bob Cousy once described him as a non-shooter who would probably burn himself out. Sports Illustrated wrote a small scouting report about Havlicek, stating that Havlicek possessed awesome physical skills. Among the first of the great swingmen, he combined brute force with quickness. At 6'5", he could overpower most guards, yet he was quicker than most forwards. Over the years, Havlicek's shooting ability would steadily improve, and eventually he would improve so much that he was known as one of the best shooters in the entire league. He would also lead his team in scoring for multiple seasons despite coming off the bench, something that was unprecedented. And even today, we rarely ever see that happening, a bench player leading his team in scoring. Also, the first player to ever make an All-Star team and All-NBA team while coming off the bench. More importantly, the team was winning a lot. The Celtics in the 1960s were the most dominant team of their era. In Havlicek's first 4 seasons, they won 4 championships. As the years went by, the Celtics would eventually insert him into the starting lineup, and it was then when Havlicek proved he can carry an entire offense. In the 1970-71 season, he averaged a career-high 28.9 points a game, a career-high 9 rebounds, and a career-high 7.5 assists. Nowadays, we always talk about small forwards who can do it all, specifically guys like LeBron and Larry Bird. But Havlicek was the first true do-it-all small forward we've ever seen. Combine his incredible versatility with an insane athleticism and gritty defense, and you got yourself one of the greatest players of all time. Another underrated aspect of his game was his ridiculous conditioning and how active he was. That's why the title of his book was called Celtic Man in Motion. He was constantly running, constantly cutting and attacking the basket, and relentlessly defending. Back then, there were no stats to keep track of the distance that every player runs. But in the book, it was estimated that he ran approximately 3 to 5 miles per game. For comparison, in the 2018-19 season, the players who moved the most were Bradley Beal and Drew Holiday. Both of them ran about 2.75 miles per game. Anyway, as Havlicek's career continued, the Celtics would win more and more championships. The majority of his titles came against none other than Jerry West and the Lakers. In fact, 5 of his first 6 championships came against the Lakers in the finals. According to Jerry West, he said, "The thing with John, he competed against you at the highest level and he wanted to win so badly. But he was always a really nice person. I don't think that I ever heard anyone say a bad word about John. He was pleasant off the court and pleasant on it. But he really competed against you." In the 1970s though, the Celtics were not as dominant as back in the 60s, and as Havlicek got older, his game was starting to show signs of age. The Celtics as a team would still be very good. They won over 50 or 60 games for many seasons. But as the league started to grow and get more popular, more and more talent started to come in. As a result, despite Havlicek having his best individual years ever, they would heavily struggle to make it back to the finals. The team would miss the playoffs a couple times and then lose in the conference finals a couple of times to the New York Knicks in 1972 and 1973. There was an unfortunate moment in 1973 because Havlicek would suffer a brutal shoulder injury in Game 3 of that series. This was the year the Celtics won 68 games, so the expectations were quite clear. They were supposed to return back to the finals and win it all. However, after that shoulder injury, Havlicek would try to make a comeback, but he wasn't himself. In Game 6 and Game 7, he would score only 9 points and 4 points respectively, as the Celtics would fall in 7 games. Havlicek and the Celtics would bounce back and eventually he would capture 2 more championships, before finally retiring in 1978. So, how good was John Havlicek actually? Well, he's arguably a top 5 small forward of all time. If not top 5, he's definitely a top 10 small forward at least. He finished his career as a 13-time All-Star, 8-time champion, 11-time All-NBA, 8-time All-Defender, and of course, a Hall of Famer. He has career averages of about 21 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. He still holds numerous franchise records too. He's the Celtics franchise leader in total games played, total points scored, and total field goals made. It's been over 40 years since he retired, and yet nobody else has broken his franchise records, not even Larry Bird or Paul Pierce. Following his death, it was clear that he touched upon many of his contemporaries and people around the league. Greg Popovich has only one photo hanging in his office, and that's a photo of John Havlicek. He was John's biggest fan. Pop said, "I was privileged and honored that one time maybe, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 years ago, he was in our gym for something. And he came back to my office and sat across from me. He sat across from me and we got to talk a little bit. I stammered and that kind of thing and just stared at him and talked to him a little bit. So I'm sure he saw it because it was right behind me on the wall right there." After his death, and well, even after his career was over to be honest, he didn't really get talked about anymore. Havlicek was always a quiet guy and did things his own way. So after his playing days were over, he did not make that many appearances in the media. He didn't do that many interviews, he never considered coaching or being a GM or executive or anything like that. Havlicek basically separated himself from the NBA after he was done playing. But on the bright side, he was very smart with his money. Just like Junior Bridgman, a guy I made a video about a long time ago, Havlicek also invested a lot of his money into Wendy's. The fast food chain was getting super popular around that time, and he hopped in early as it exploded onto the scene. So in his later years, he was doing well financially. And that's all folks, that sums up the story of John Havlicek. But before I end this video, I'll leave you guys with one more quote. This one is from Dave Cowens, another former teammate. Everybody says nice things about you when you die. I wish they said them to John when he was alive. John was always overlooked. They never talked enough about him. I used to ask people, why don't you talk about John Havlicek? It was always Magic Johnson and Jerry West and Dr. J, but John belonged in those conversations. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.